Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast. I feel like I do my temperature check every time, my weather check every time I do one of these lives, and I'm looking outside and it's less than ideal out there. So somebody somewhere, maybe out there in Hawaii, you've got the sunshine, but it sure is not here on the East Coast where I'm at. But I'm excited that we're going to talk about winning over federal buyers by saying the right things the right way, right? There's this line about doing the right things the right way, and enough of the right things lead to success. Well, that can also happen in conversations or building relationships where you can win over other people, federal buyers in particular, by saying the right thing in the right way. And today I'm going to try to talk to you about how to identify those right things. So just making sure I'm turning off my little chat here. By the way, I want to just say Happy Veterans Day to all my fellow veterans out there. If you don't know this about me, I was in the Army. I started off as a airborne Army Ranger when I got into the Army, and when I left the Army, I was working for the Secretary of the Army. So I had a really pretty cool career going through, and maybe someday I'll tell you about it. But it led a lot to where I became a government contractor when I got out and started my own businesses and ran my own businesses. And so it was pretty exciting. Okay, so let's get started here. If you don't know who I am Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. I'm excited that you're here for the daily LinkedIn Live federal sales training, where I teach processes and procedures, steps for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business owner. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When you follow the process A to Z, you're going to have predictable, repeatable results. And that's what I want for you, is predictable, repeatable results, right? Generally, that's what all of us want for each other. Before we get started, do me a favor, help me, help others, help buyers. Remember who you are. Put your company name and your core competency into the chat. Use just 2 or 3 words that help us understand and remember your core competency. That way we know to connect with you when we've got a reason or something pops up. So I'm looking right there at Deploy 360 and top tier cybersecurity, right, for Joanne. And so that kind of thing pops into my mind, and I begin to connect Joanne and cybersecurity, right? I want to be able to do that for you. The other thing about chat, it's your community. Please engage with each other in chat. It's where you can find potential teammates. It's where you can find professional friends to go after different agencies together. Or if you're in the same area like San Antonio, Texas, you can maybe get together and network, have a cup of coffee, and help each other kind of drive towards success in the federal market. Finally, I just wanted to say thank you to our sustaining members. Without our sustaining members in the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, we wouldn't be able to bring you not just this live daily training, but also all the great content we bring, the small business directory, the portal directory, et cetera. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your contribution in there. All right, so today we're going to be talking about, again, winning over federal buyers by saying the right thing in the right way. And what that means for me, and I'm going to show you a lot of screen stuff today. Often I just talk me to you, but I want to show you where I'm actually finding what I call the right things. And so the first thing I want to cover is learning their language. I'm going to go in and show you what I mean when I say, if you learn their language, the federal buyer's language, when you go in and you start talking to them, you'll be able to win them over. And winning them over just means for them to begin to know, like, and trust you faster. You'll be able to win them over because they'll feel understood because you're using their language back at them. Where do you get that language? That's what we're going to cover today. The second thing is use early engagement, right? So when you use early engagement, when you prepare properly with early engagement, it helps you win them over. So if you're going to meet with somebody, engaging with them in areas that aren't the meeting helps you begin to prepare for winning them over when you do have a meeting. So we'll talk about some examples, but you can think about LinkedIn and social media. We call that social selling. You can also think about vendor outreach sessions, matchmaking sessions. All those kind of things are places where you can do early engagement. And then the third kind of bullet I'm going to cover, and these 3 bullets I'm going to weave in together just into the talk as I share my screen in a minute. The third one is controlling the meeting through proper preparation. It gives you this authority shifting, which is what I want you to do. Authority shifting, when you think about, there's 3 places you could be. You could be down here and your federal buyer's here. You could be on the same level, or you could be higher than your federal buyer in authority shifting. That doesn't mean one person's better than the other. theoretically, right now, I've got a little bit of authority shifting over you because I'm teaching you a topic that you're interested in learning. But if we were talking about your company and your customer, maybe we're at the same level, right? But if you're teaching me something, then you begin to have that authority shifting. The ideal place is right there in the middle for most of us, right? Where we're kind of on an equal playing field. But when you go into a meeting with a federal buyer, you do want to, in a sales perspective, you do want to kind of shift that authority in your favor a little bit. And the way you do that is by being very prepared. And we'll talk about that. But when you're learning their language, you begin to be able to prepare yourself to shift that authority. And by shifting that authority, they just see you as an authority. That's what it means. It doesn't mean control in any kind of negative way that you might think of it. It just means the conversation, if you've ever been in a conversation with a federal buyer, especially like a small business specialist or somebody, where they're kind of hammering you questions, right? So they ask you a question, the authority is shifting in their favor, and you answer, but then they ask you another question. It's like, well, how many people do you have? This kind of stuff. And you begin to feel like you're beneath them, which is not where you should be. And what we want to do is shift that. And when you start asking the questions, when you start saying, hey, I was looking at your strategic plan, it says this, what's your vision for that? It's like, what? I don't know. It's like, let me figure it out. Or let me go ask Jane. She's responsible for that. Now you've got a little bit of authority shifting. And the reason I want you to keep that idea in mind, that way of seeing how you can have interactions by authority shifting, is because when you're going in and saying the right things in the right way, it enables you to have authority shifting. When you have authority shifting, then you're kind of able to drive the meeting, the conversation where you want it to go. And in sales, you are the driver, right? It's not the federal buyer. The federal buyer has a need and we have to solve it, right? We have to address their need in the way that satisfies them. But when it comes to a meeting, a sales meeting, you should be in control of that meeting, because if you're not, then you're not going to get the outcomes that you want. But if you want to go from, let's say, a small business specialist or a contracting officer to a program office, hey, can you introduce me over here? If you haven't given them a reason to feel confidence that, wow, I need to put you in front of the program office because they're way more knowledgeable about what you're asking me, right? That's what I mean by authority shifting. So hopefully that's making sense. Actually, if it's making sense, do me a favor, just put authority shifting into the chat, and I'm going to line myself up to share my screen here. And as I'm sharing my screen, I want to tackle learning their language. So right here, just put authority shifting into the chat. Let me know you were tracking on that. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I just put it as a placeholder for 1 second. By the way, this is our company website, or GovCon Chamber website, and here's the directories we talk about. They're right there, free to download. So please make sure you get them. I want to talk to you, and I'm going to use this guy, Paul Puckett. He's the basically head of cloud for the Army. So that's huge for those of you selling cloud. It's a perfect example for me to use as I move forward. So this is his LinkedIn profile, and inside of his LinkedIn profile, he tends to post content that he thinks is important, interesting, valuable to get out to industry, valuable to talk among his peers within the government. But sometimes LinkedIn is just a perfect vehicle. By the way, if you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, feel free. So I wanted to scroll down here to this post that he did, and let me zoom in. This post is where I want to just start for a second about learning the language. I loved it when I saw it. It was a different way of looking at something. But here he starts off by saying, we're still not talking clearly about cloud adoption in the Department of Defense. So if you haven't tracked on this in sales, to me, that's a statement that I might be able to begin to switch into a sales question. I call them problem questions. I want to get Paul or anybody else responsible for cloud to begin to talk more about that. What are you talking about? You're not clearly, still not talking clearly about cloud. The cool thing for Paul, or for us about Paul, is that he talks about it further down. I discussed the necessity for any cloud strategy to address these three things, right? Address buying, securing, and building independently. Tell me more, Paul. What are you talking about, right? And you may not be in the cloud space, but follow along with this. He is telling me when you think about cloud, or when I think about cloud, I'm thinking about it from three different ways on the cloud strategy: buying, securing, and building on the cloud. But I see it as independently being done. And so what do you mean by that? Well, when I'm coming down, he's nice enough to tell me exactly what I'm asking, right? Buying is simply that. It's just the buying. And I can go in and kind of look at this, but right, securing is a managed service offering, is how he sees it and how he's talking about it. And he's leading me to a different document about secure cloud computing architecture. So now what I can see is this person that I might want to meet and talk with believes enough in securing through a managed service offering that he's referencing this other article. If I went to meet with him talking about managed service offerings or talking about the secure cloud computing architecture, would be really helpful to the dialogue. At least it would bring me up to an equal level of authority with him in a meeting where I can ask him about it, right? And then the last one really quick is building, right? It's often a vehicle or set of vehicles to rapidly acquire stuff. And when you go through these three, right, what I see is language that he's sharing with me, where he's talking about securing from a sense that this provides a secure landing zone for any workload. If I use a statement like that, he'll know I'm reading his stuff. Or if I begin to understand, what the heck does that even mean, right? I'm a cloud guy. This provides a secure landing zone for any workload. I might turn to my internal solution architecture proposal writers and say, do you know what this guy Paul's talking about? Because I'm going to try to set up a meeting with him, but I want to make sure I'm going in talking about what we offer to him, right? So I'm trying to learn his language through this. I'm going to skip past this one. This one was really good, and I really liked it because of this way that he described. I discussed the necessity right here. I discussed the necessity for any cloud strategy to address buying, securing, and building independently. When I saw that and it popped out in these three different bullets, I instantly knew that was learning his language. So let's keep going with that. So this guy, let's just say this is the guy I want to go meet with, and I'm trying to learn his language and think about engagement. First off, just on engagement, right? I would begin to at least give this a thumbs up, but look at the comments, right? There's not that many comments and you can begin to get engaged. But what you see here is, here's this person here, James is responding, right? And here's Paul responding back. That's what I mean by one of the ways of doing engagement. This is a person I might want to meet with, or I know for sure I want to meet with him because he's at least got traction on the vision of the cloud for the Army. Plus he probably knows everybody downstream related to Army cloud implementation where I might want to play. Well, he's engaging out there. If I engage with him over a period of 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks, which isn't that long in the GovCon world, if I engage with it and not just falsely, but I look at this the way I'm talking to you, where it's really exciting. If I look at that, he'll begin to know who I am. My name will come up on his memory. This is why I tell you 2 or 3 core competencies in there will help. So let me show you a couple others. So I took Paul and I said, well, okay, I want to go find Paul. And here's just a research tip. I'm saying I want to find Paul Puckett in the Army. That's where he is. That's enough information for me to put. And then I use this little tip I taught people in earlier training, but put file type :PDF. And the only results you'll get back are all these PDF files. And PDF files tend to have a little bit more information than just a typical web page where he might be referenced over and over again. So it's a simple way for me to do that. So there's a couple of AFCEA documents here, and I'm just going to go through them fairly fast, but show you, right? Here's an Army digital transformation strategy. Paul is a cloud guy. I want to meet him for cloud, but now he's being referenced in the Army's digital transformation strategy. In what concept? Where is it fitting in? So I begin to see some of the language that's in here, right? I don't want to spend forever teaching about this cloud, more about teaching about the deck, right? Here it talks about, okay, cloud is seen as a digital capability. Right? I want to use that term. I'm doing digital transformation, but cloud is a digital capability within that model. As I come down, I can see the same thing, right? Cloud modernization challenges and slow adoption. So here's the hurdles to accomplish digital transformation. So I'm looking at this thing, and if I'm going to go in and have a conversation with Paul, I'm going to ask him about this, right? I'm learning his language, or I'm learning how they're talking, but they call it hurdles to accomplishing digital transformation. Hey, Paul, I was looking at that. This, again, goes into that that authority shifting. It doesn't mean I have necessarily more authority, but he's appreciating the fact that it's there. So you can see, if I keep coming down, it'll be the same thing. There was one more. So here it's just laying out the cloud, right? And I can begin to see how the cloud fits within everything else, where he talks about some of the activity that's coming out of the Sea Army. But in here, right, where it's create, CREATTE or TEE, I can look at that and maybe research it more, and I'm coming in talking about what he's doing. So here, next document, similar kind of thing, right? We're trying to learn Paul's language, and almost anybody you meet with, you can find language. In this particular case, Paul Puckett is writing or authoring or speaking out on some of this stuff, but I might meet with Paul's deputy, or I might meet with a contracting officer who supports the Army cloud side of the house. I can still use documents like this one to speak the language, but now when I'm talking to, say, a contracting officer related to Army cloud, it's it's a little higher level, but I can still reference that I'm looking at the cloud modernization briefing that happened. And so in here, I begin to learn about what their vision and mission is. ECMA is the cloud side of the Army. Here, right, it says the Army can't maximize its modernization strategy without the cloud, which is the backbone. Hey, I saw that. How do you feel about that? And by the way, like here's the 2020 document, but there's a 2022 one I'll show you in a second. But I would have gone to look at this document, which is coming out of this deck. So as I come down, I can look at some of the ways that Paul briefed whoever he briefed, talking about, what is the cloud and how do they begin to talk about it? The strategic objectives of his cloud. These are important language that I want to use in here. So if I look at decreased time to field, right? What does he mean by that? And is it the idea that somebody in the Army has a need? We're over here building it. How fast can we field it? Field it means basically build it, deploy it into the Army cloud environment, and field it down to the person who actually has the need. Think about a soldier downstream, or downrange. You're never going to sit there and a gun's no good up here. It has to get all the way down in their hands and be working and do the job. Well, it's the same thing with things that land on the cloud. And so I would begin to try to weave some of this language into what we're talking about or what he's talking about. So as you come down, I can see the same thing, right? You see what I'm talking about, where I'm trying to say, here's the language that's being shared. If I speak in his language, I will begin to be able to get traction with him, where I'm winning him over by saying the right things. I'm not talking about the Army cloud in the Navy way, or more importantly, I'm not talking about Army cloud in commercial ways. There's ways that they talk about the cloud in the Army in particular that relate specifically to what they're doing. So all sorts of great language. Other places you can find it, like here's if you don't know IT, right? Cloud is basically a platform where things live on. Here you've got enterprise DevSecOps, community of practice, and DevSecOps loosely is basically just software development or development, right? And in here, Paul's talking about something. So if I come down, I can begin to find out, well, why is he in here? How do I see what he's saying as it relates to DevOps somewhere else? And so here I can see he's talking about continuous risk management framework, I think is what the C is. So I see where he's fitting. If that's interesting to me, I'll go down. This all goes back into the preparation. But here's another one where he's the signature on this. This is a DoD Enterprise DevSecOps reference design. And there's all sorts of these documents out there that enable me to learn more about what Paul does, right? So I don't want to go too long, but like this is the July 22nd. So it's very, very recent. A couple of other documents that are out there is like over here. This is an older one, but Air Force Data Strategy, Paul is referenced in here. Like and I don't know why. Let's see if we can find it actually. Paul. Hey, it was in there a minute ago, but I hate it when things don't work out right. But let me show you one last document as it relates to finding the language, right? Here's the Army Cloud Plan that you saw for 2020. Here it is for October 2022. And this is a big lift for them. There's all sorts of activity on LinkedIn and other places where they're talking about it. But as I come in, I can see, here is Paul and Raj, the CIO, putting this out and talking about what they're looking for. And this is really important. This is the language I'm talking about. If you want to win over the people you're meeting with and federal buyers, and you think about what are the right things to say, well, you want to align with their strategic intent, the way they lay it out. And then as they go forward, they start talking about strategic objectives. When you go in to meet with somebody like Paul, do you talk generically or do you speak specifically to strategic objectives? And if you come in here and you start looking about where can I help? You know what? We're in the cloud, but actually we could really help. And sorry, hold on. Let me scroll really quick. We can really help right here in data center optimization because that's our specialty or something, right? Well, now you're speaking to the language around the cloud, specifying a line of effort that's in a strategic objective, right? So expand the cloud is the objective. And down here in LOE, line of effort, is data center optimization. Paul, I'd like to pull a thread on that, because as I look at that, and the goal here, if you can see my hand, the goal is to modernize and migrate these applications. Where are you on that, right? If I talk those terms, and that's what I mean by language, modernize and migrate. That's an example of a term he would be familiar with, because primarily he probably wrote this together with his team, but he's putting a stamp on here. And that kind of stuff, these kind of material and resources go a huge way to helping you be able to speak their language. So if you understand what I'm saying when I say learn their language, do me a favor, put learn their language into the chat. Let me know you're tracking on that. One last thing I wanted to talk about as it just relates to engagement out there. Let me pull this back to I use a call plan, and I just pulled up the first one I had so that I could show you generically. But when I do any kind of meetings and I'm going to try to win over a buyer by saying the right things, I don't leave it to chance and memory. I really try to get in there and put it down, right? So this is a call plan if I'm going to go in and talk about the 8A Stars Free program, because that's one of our projects that we work on with customers, is helping promote 8A Stars 3 for the Stars 3 contract holders. So if I'm going in, though, one of the things that I would be trying to do is to line up some talking points. And so as you look to those documents and that material I shared, this is something you can do where you pull out, hey, Paul, I was reading, I was noticing the cloud plan, some other stuff, but I thought it was pretty fascinating that you're also in the DevSecOps documents for DoD. That's what we call an introduction talking point, but it begins to get them to see that you've done that research, and getting them to see you've done the research is one of those right things in my mind. If you can get them to see that you've done the research, then you can get them to show or see that you care enough about them to have done the research. Research is the first step in the 7-step government contracting process, right? And there's that line out there, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. If you start talking about the material they're putting out, then they will know that you care enough, and they will start caring about what you have to say. The part I wanted to say, though, is all that material I was looking at, when you get ready to say the right things, well, write some questions down, right? These things that I saw in the research material with Paul Puckett, I could write them down as kind of reverse engineer a statement into a question, and I can write it down and be able to ask questions. So if you just think about the way I've got it here, and I'm sorry I didn't do a cloud one for you. That's just too much for a 30-minute training. But here's an example, right? Number one, when I'm asking here for the contracting officer or the small business specialist, is when you're sitting in a meeting about a particular requirement coming up, when do you bring up Stars 3? When do you guys discuss, hey, there's like these 10 contract vehicles, let's look at Stars 3. And so I have a question like that. I don't ask these verbatim. They're in there to remind me and kind of trigger me to have that question. But what I want to know is, when do you start thinking about that? With Paul, right? I might sit there and say that same kind of question where I look at, here they're talking about, creating financial and privileged oversight and optimization or something. It's like, hey, how important is financial and privileged management oversight? Like, what are you trying to do? Is that just a feature enhancement, or are you trying to address a problem that might have been coming out? When you look at this document and you're learning to speak in their language, it also allows you to question in their language. And that's something I think that's really helpful for you as you move forward trying to track on it. So by the way, if you didn't track on this, anytime you find somebody like Paul Puckett that you want to meet with, just go to his profile. And the reason I see so much from this person is because, well, I'm following him. I mean, we're connected, first connections, but most importantly, I hit this bell and I get notified whenever Paul's dropping any information out there, et cetera, that could be important to me. I care about the Army Cloud. I want to know anything Paul Puckett's saying, because even if he says 2 out of 10 things that I don't care about, I can just dismiss those knowing that 80% of what he says is relevant to me, right? 100% of what he says is important, but what he says to me, 80% of it's relevant type thing. So let me go ahead and come back in here. Hopefully this made sense. I wanted to go through just kind of this quick training of when you think about how do you win over a federal buyer, it's about saying the right things the right way. And I believe the right way is first starting with their way, right? Then you can walk them to your way after that, right? You can begin to use your language. But a weakness sometimes we have is we go in and talk about what we sell using our language. And if you can just do some research, right? Research will lead you to being able to understand the right things to say in the right way. So if that made sense, go ahead and put research in. Let me know you're tracking on research. And I'm going to wrap up here because I think that's the big focus for today, was just letting you primarily know about learning their language and using their language. It'll help you identify that right way and the right things. One other thing, remember that we talked about this, and I want to just remind you, you want to, when you think about authority shifting, you don't want to be here. You want to shift your authority so you can get up here. And the easiest way for you to do that is to just prepare. When you prepare through research, as an example, you're now in a better position to have meetings, and you will see better outcomes from those meetings. So if you appreciated today's training, do me a favor, throw thanks into the chat. Please consider becoming a sustaining member. We value our sustaining members very much, and we count on them. And then remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. Part of the process is coming back to next week's training, and I will see you then. Hope you have a great weekend.